So that was good. There we go. Thank you for coming back. And yeah, and this week I'm just going to start straight in with the PowerPoint presentation. I kind of want to get that out of the way, and then there's a wee bit of an interactive part as well, where we'll get you right in a wee bit. So I'm going to try and share, and I think that's it. Can I get a wee thumbs up? Is everybody seeing climate? Great, excellent. So this one is leveraging the landscape, and our learning objectives for the next 30 minutes are to understand how to use landscape as more than just a backdrop. We want to develop skills in connecting settings to climate themes. And we would like to create vivid environmental descriptions that enhance story meaning. So it's not just description for description's sake, it's to use that description to evoke sort of an emotive response in the reader. So the landscape shapes stories in powerful ways. So we have this physical impact on plot. So, weather events can force character decisions, or we can have natural barriers that create obstacles, or the environmental changes drive character movement, or seasonal cycles even affect timing and pacing of a story, which can be quite a nice thing to do. So it can move time forward, or you can look back on in the past. So I've sort of put that into the two main points on that, because some of these points overlap. All right. So, and then we have character development. The landscape can help us with character development because the characters interact with their environmental sort of situations, if you like. So, and how they interact reveals their personality. So their relationship with nature shows values and background, and the environmental challenges that you maybe throw at your character can expose their strengths and weaknesses. And the character's adaptation to the landscape can also show growth. You can incorporate that, if you like, into your character arc sometimes. Then also we will use the landscape as an emotional resonance, there's nothing like a sunny morning to portray a good mood, or a misty, like we've had this past week, that's been really sort of like spooky and atmospheric. So the landscape can actually mirror the character's emotions, and the setting can create moods and atmosphere. And the environment can trigger emotional responses in a reader. So, even just, I'm thinking more like movies as well, where, a beautiful vista, gives you a feeling of maybe escapism and whatnot. And then you also have a connection to a place that can influence a character's motivations. When you get this feeling that a character just loves where they live, or the habitat that they're surrounded by, you really kind of connect with that as a reader. So that's what you're aiming for. So the thematic power then from landscape, it can, landscape changes, especially changes, can symbolize larger themes. I have a few examples of this, so don't worry if if it's not gelling quite yet. But the environmental details reinforce your story messages sometimes as well. Setting conflicts, sometimes parallel character conflicts. So something I've done in my most recent novel is my characters are going through fertility issues, and the bigger background story is actually climate change. Now, the two aren't connected that we know of, but it's just sort of showing that, nature will do its thing regardless of what you want to do. And so natural cycles can also echo in your story structure. So I have the next slide. So that's just sort of summarizing what I've just sort of said. But I don't know if you're aware of Barbara Kingsolver's flight behavior, but it's basically an unusual appearance of monarch butterflies in Appalachia. So Appalachia is that mountain range, if you like, down the east coast of North America, sort of even all the way from Nova Scotia, I think, or Newfoundland in Canada, all the way down to definitely down through the Carolinas, where there was the big flooding. We're talking about climate change. That alone is a story in itself, that those big floods in North Carolina, that happened in Appalachia. So Barbara Kingsolver's flight behavior is about is a story about monarch butterflies in Appalachia, and it's because of climate disruption. That's what actually drives the entire plot. So the protagonist's discovery of the phenomena changes her life path, right? Because basically the butterflies are in Appalachia. That's not normally where they go. So weather events, unusual warmth, and then devastating rains create plot tension. It is a device that's very easy to employ. And I'm going to just read out this little quote. I just loved how this worked for my PowerPoint presenter for my lesson today. So this is a quote from the book, and it says, "The flame now appears to lift from individual treetops in showers of orange sparks, exploding the way a pine log does in a campfire when it's poked. The sparks spiraled upward in swirls like funnel clouds, twisters of brightness against grey sky." So what I was going to do, no, I'll just leave that. Okay, so basically the author is describing monarch butterflies, not actual fire, and she's using the fire imagery as a metaphor to describe the massive congregations of these monarch butterflies in the trees. And when they do come into the trees, they do like completely, like land on every branch and completely cloak the trees. And so this is a pivotal moment in the novel when the protagonist first discovers millions of monarch butterflies have appeared in this Appalachian forest where they've never been seen before. And the butterflies appear like flames because their wings are bright orange. They move in swirling masses. You can't see my hands moving. I talk with my hands, sorry. They move in swirling masses when disturbed, and the morning light catches their wings. And the grey sky actually, it's more that it does provide a contrast, but more than that, even just the word grey dropped in there makes you think of smoke. And that, sort of like powers up this idea of a flame through the trees. And it's a really powerful example because of landscape writing, because it subverts your expectations. So what looks like fire is actually butterflies. And it shows how climate change has disrupted the monarch's normal migration patterns. Now this is, this is actually something that's happening, and I think Barbara Kingsolver has managed to put it into a fictional story, or it may be that it is taken from like sort of semi-autobiographical. The fire imagery foreshadows the environmental crisis the butterflies represent, and it captures both beauty and foreboding in the same image. So that was Barbara Kingsolver. I actually on social media came across an example that I liked that is closer to home. Some of you might even know this poet, Stuart Charles Flynn. And he has this poem now published in The Storms, which is a journal of poetry, prose, and visual art. It's a lovely wee journal. It's just come. This issue has just come out, and this issue is all about Dublin. And but this particular poem is Lookouts. And if anybody's been down that way at all, you will have seen the Poolbeg chimneys. So what I liked about this was that it immediately pulled me in, because it's like, oh yeah, I know that. So I'll just read it out. But the Poolbeg chimneys are two giant barber's poles, still advertising when the shop is closed and the scissors of pollution are blunted. Maybe from 200 meters up, they see beyond the incinerator's smoke many more decommissionings to come, a cleaner future with nothing like themselves, and they will become gigantic pencils thrust out of the past into a new world, writing each other out of history. So this really works because the chimneys become metamorphical devices, and they're not just passive structures, but they're active participants. They see, they become, and they write. In the end, they write. And so you have this shift from them being polluters in the past age. And he's even talked about them being like barber's poles, which is it's sort of a more outdated visual or like a thing that you would see on the streets. And then there's a present transition, still advertising when the shop is closed. And then you have this future environmental change, a cleaner future with nothing like themselves. And also I like that this one brings some hope, because we want to particularly as we get closer to the end of this course, we want to look at more hopeful environmental writing. So the chimneys become narrators of environmental change, and they use a local landmark to tell a global story. And it makes even quite ugly infrastructure poetic. That's a real skill. And it's using this Dublin landmark to tell a story. So yeah, so I'm going to just click on to this. This is a writing exercise so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come off because I need to check the time, and my only timer is on the Zoom because I've hidden my phone in case we're waiting, in case anybody calls. So I've no time thingy. So I'm going to stop the share for a brief second just to check how much time we have. Right, we're good. Okay, I'm going back into the share. And it's this one. Share. Okay. So, everybody can hear me still okay? Good stuff. All right. So this writing exercise, I sort of think of this as, I remember when this was all fields, because my father used to walk me to school in the mornings and we'd walk through parts of Armagh, and my dad would say, I remember when this was all fields, and I just could not comprehend that these housing estates were fields. And now I do the exact same thing to my nephews. So it's just that the last one in particular, this I'll just jump down. The fourth thing is solastalgia snapshot. It captures the emotional impact of the environment. So solastalgia, I don't even know if I'm saying it right, but it's like nostalgia for past environments. Okay. So we've got 4 different exercises. I would like you to choose one of the exercises because we don't have time for each person to do the 4. But when you get your video, you can always go back in and do the other exercises if you so wish to. But choose the one that sort of speaks to you the most. And you're going to have 5 minutes. You can turn off your screens if you want to, or you can mute yourselves, and you can turn off your cameras if you want to, just to have 5 minutes to work on this, and then we'll come back after it. But it's choose one. I'll let you read through them yourselves, and our 5 minutes starts now. Find right. All right, I'm going to just sort of give you the heads up. 30 seconds left. It doesn't have to be complete. It doesn't have to be finished. It was just something to get the juices, the creative juices flowing. And what we'll do is we're going to bring it over to you, okay? But don't panic. What we're going to do is we're going to have another chat waterfall. We did a wee mini one of these in the last chat, so these can be quite fun if we figure them out. So you type your favorite, go back through what you've written, or you can use something that was in one of the if you're not confident about using your own words, you can feel free to use something from the examples I gave you, or other examples if they're from something else. But type your favorite phrase from your exercise into the chat. Somewhere between 3 and 7 words long is plenty. And then when I say go, we're all going to hit return at the same time and see. Some people are way before me, but that's okay. And then we'll go. So you can cut and paste if you've been writing on your screen, or I'll give you a minute just to write it in. So, and then what I'm going to do is stop the share, because that's really all I have there. There's one wee page left, but I can see it better whenever I stop the share. So go, do your things into the thing, and I'm going to try and keep up with the chat as it goes. Okay. So our numbers decimated. Yeah. Nature's need versus man's need. Yeah. No blackberries to stain our fingers. Oh, I like that. I hate the thought of that too. Field slicers and hedge rippers. Oh, very, very emotive. Field slicers and hedge rippers. Very violent imagery, but it's a very violent thing, I suppose, especially if you're a creature living in the hedge or the field. The rock pools were a source of wonder, Marion, teeming with sea creatures. Oh, I love it. And you don't think of, the rock pools are just so full of little sea creatures. You always think of sea creatures as maybe being bigger, the swirl and rush, and then the roar. Oh, very good. Strewn with the detritus of modern everyday lives. Instead of a river, now a motorway runs through it. Oh, that's very good. And some of our motorways are turning back into rivers as well with climate change. I didn't have enough jam jars to save them all. Oh, Annie, just that sentence alone, that's like one of those little flash microfictions. I didn't have enough jam jars to save them all. It just points at what's happening. Giant ogres made homeless, no bathing spots for the gnomes. Oh. They will never make me leave this land. I will die here just as my father and his father before him did. There's that lovely connection to the land. There's that lovely connection of the pain of having to leave a land, which a lot of people will have experienced because of war and climate change in recent years. We explored the bush as if it was our own place, and now they've put a freeway through it. I mean, that is really something that a lot of people probably connect with, especially if they've lived out in the country like me. We thought that the fields around us, they might have belonged to the farmers around us, but they were ours, dispersed and overwhelmed by the huge movement of water. Wow, yeah. Did I miss one? I've missed one. I've jumped. Sorry, I'm trying to get them all. It isn't happening. It was supposed to be years away before it came to us. Yeah, that's very much the sentiment. And then the very next one, it makes me think of what's happening in Spain, the two things together. Weeds cover the ground where love was once found. So that's an interesting one, Irina, because weeds might not necessarily be a bad thing to have around. You know, what we call weeds are maybe good for habitat. So that's an interesting twist on it. Philip, when I was 9 years old, my family moved out of Manhattan, the busiest part of New York City, into the proverbially leafy suburbs. My parents' friends would, what would be thing that would say to me, "Aren't you happy you're moving to the country? I already knew better than them," and answered, "It's not the country, there are no cows." Yes. I haven't thought about this for years. It made me tear up over an event that happened over 60 years ago. Oh my goodness. Okay, so you can see how landscape is such an emotive part of how we think as writers. And why it is therefore such an important thing for us as people, and why we want to reach out to others as writers and use this platform of writing about nature, writing about climate change, writing about the urgency of it, in order to be activists and to save what we can that's still here. So I would we've got like 7 minutes left. So if anybody would like to express anything verbally, we have time for that this week. I'm really pleased that we could do that, if we can. So basically, I want you to have a little think then about, you know, sort of effective techniques of using metaphors, of using personification, as we saw with the poet, personifying how the chimneys watched as things changed, or how the butterflies were, you know, that used the metaphor of the butterflies being like fire. So if there's any questions, comments, if anybody wants to raise a hand and give you guys a wee bit of time to share, that's more than welcome. It's a big chat room. It is a bit scary. There's a lot of people. I can, for the few faces that I see, they're all sort of smiling nervously. You might have to unmute yourself. You can jump in, or you can stick up your hand. I think that will come up on the screen. It's good to know that maybe this is not a thing that you want to do on your lunchtime either. If you don't, I'll know for future. Rhonda, if you want to go, yeah.
I'll be brave. I just wanted to say that I
still
haven't.
Can't hear you, Rhonda.
Oh.
Do you go again?
Can you hear me now? Right.
Oh, so I'm the only one who can't hear her.
Can everybody else hear me? Oh, they can all hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Let's see.
All right. Okay. Right. Well, I'll even though you can't hear me, Byddi, I'll talk anyway. I was just going to say, probably people are scared, and I haven't written anything since I was probably at primary school. So I'm just here to find out a bit more. I have no experience whatsoever in writing. So that might help other people as well.
If you can talk, you can write.
Thank you.
Byddi, you're muted.
I'm not getting I just was saying to Rhonda, I only got the tail end of that because my speakers had switched again to the wrong speaker. But I'm good. I got what you said at the end, and thank you very much. Yes, everybody is welcome. Whatever level you're at in your writing, or if you've not written before, it's, and as somebody shouted in there, yes, if you can talk, you can write, and I can talk a lot, so that's why I thought I could write.
Well, I just like, I'm very new to writing too, and I just find sometimes the structure in it is a bit difficult. You know, the mid part of it. So it's okay with the introduction what I want to do, but you know, how to develop characters, so the theme and that before. So I would be interested.
Okay. Well, what I would say is that if you're and this goes for regardless of what length of a piece you're working on, but
Yeah,
it always helps to know how it's going to end.
yeah. I said
I think. Now, other people are quite good at sort of, they call it working by the seat of their pants or pantsering it, you know, but I quite like to plot out. And you also need to think about what your midpoint is. So this will go for everything. Long, like flat, this is flash fiction. This is like a 6-part series or whatever. You always think about your midpoint. Your midpoint is the point where everything utterly changes and the character can't go back.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
So if you think of that as your midpoint and you're
Yeah.
your character through to that point, and then what happens after that, that will help you, and it will also help you. You will have a character arc as well. So you have to keep that in mind. You've all these threads that you're pulling through, and so your character will go from a place where they begin and change their something will change with the character.
Yes.
They will land at the end. Invariably, the character will set out with a goal. The character will want something. You don't have to give the character what they want, but the character will also need something. And what the character wants and what the character needs may not be the same thing. And it's usually a quite satisfying story if the character gets what they want, what they need, but not necessarily what they want. It's usually a more satisfying ending. So
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Byddi.
yeah. So
Oh, thanks.
I'm just checking into the chat is wonderful, actually. People are really utilizing it, and there's lots of really interesting things. I'm hoping that Sheila, I don't know, but if there's some way we can preserve the chat after the meeting as well, if we can save it and send that out, that would be great. Because it's great to, just feel free to drop in links and things. Somebody mentioned at the last lesson that we had that about the Booker Prize winner, and I went and looked it up, Orbital, and I've just started reading it, and whoever that was, thank you so much. It is such a gift. It is an absolutely beautifully written book, and talk about leveraging landscape. They use the entire planet from the view of the space station to talk about the landscape. And I've only just started reading it, so hopefully I'll be able to pull some examples of it for you guys further down the line. So that was great. Well, listen, thank you very much. That's our time up. I hope you got something out of that. Feel free to let me know on social media if you're connected, if you want anything changed, or if it's too fast, too slow, things aren't working. I'm open to listening. Thank you.